Welcome everyone. Thank you for being here, those who are in person in the room, as well as those joining us online. Warm welcome to our dissemination event. I'm Aisha Helmat, Work Package Lead for lessons to be learned from businesses on how we can build skill shortages. This workshop helps us, I would say, with a shared commitment to tackling one of the pressing issues facing European labor markets today, and that's skill shortages. And we believe it marks a key milestone for the GS4S project, which is a research initiative that has set out to understand how organizations navigate those murky skill shortage waters and what they can learn in terms of lessons from businesses in shaping smarter and more effective policies, hopefully. We want to share today particularly our findings from this fourth work package. We set ourselves an ambitious agenda when we were drafting the aims. That was to map and to compare how multinationals and smaller businesses navigate skill shortages, and whether that is through international migration, automation, outsourcing, offshoring, or simply just investing in homegrown talent. So the analysis focused on four key EU countries. You will hear more about that in the subsequent presentation, as well as three key sectors. And we believe, having looked at the trade-offs of different approaches to filling skill shortages, we got some interesting insights that can help guide generally policy making and reach informed decisions. So with that, of course, the real test is going to be what our panelists, the second panelist of professionals, policymaking practitioners, will be reflecting on. So does this make sense? We'll hear more about that from Pascal, of course, as our moderator. So without further ado, I will hand over, I guess, to Pascal to say a bit about the structure of the program.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you very much. It's great to be here. Thanks for joining us here in person, and plenty of people online as well. I think this shows the relevance of the discussion we're having here today. The structure is as follows. We're going to start with three presentations from several consortium members, sharing the key insights from the survey, the large-scale employer survey that we have been implementing. And we're focusing on the different elements of the survey, specifically the multinational companies and the SME perspectives. And then that's the first hour of our meeting. There's a short coffee break in between. In the second part of the meeting, we are really curious in how these findings actually resonate with practice. So we have a panel from practice, policy practice, and the private sector representatives as well, to reflect together with us and discuss what these findings are. And of course, as scholars, we see what the responses have been in the survey, but we would like to somehow color the black box that we have at the moment, because we have, of course, from our research expertise, we have some particular assumptions. We think we have certain interpretations of what we think these strategies for closing skill shortages are, and also some reflectivity as to what differences are between small and larger companies and the various strategies, with the three sectors, of course, also involved. And we're curious as to what specific sector strategies are. So that's basically the second part of the workshop. We have a couple of particular questions prepared for the practitioners, so we'd take those as a starting base for our discussion. But we're also curious to invite spontaneous responses from the field to hear what perhaps we have not thought about. So that's basically us. And for the present participants here at Radboud University in Nijmegen, we will close with an informal borrel. This is an informal drink, which is a Dutch approach of continuing the formal discussion in a more informal way. And that is usually quite a successful approach because there are issues that you would like to, further evaluate, reflect on, and with a drink that usually is quite fruitful. So that's us basically. We hope in this setup that it's a hybrid setup. So we have participants here in person. We have a lot of participants online as well. What is important for this event is also to ensure that we have the possibility for the online participants to put in questions as well. So perhaps, Hilla, if you could monitor the online activities and just speak up and say, well, there's something coming in that we would like to take on board, then I'll try to incorporate it in the discussion here in Nijmegen. Yeah, I think without further ado, we can get started with the snapshot findings from research. And I would like to invite to the floor, I think, Daniel, I think you're starting, and Aisha and Daniel, maybe, I think would be what to mean. I will start. We'll see. So as he's setting up the slides, our first speaker is Daniel Speldekamp, is assistant professor at Groningen University in business administration, and she has been working on this first presentation together with Professor Aisha Zakke-Helmhout at Radboud University, who you've already met.
Thank you. Also, thank you, Pascal and Aisha, for the opening. I'm Daniel Speldekamp. It's nice to be here. Much obliged that I can. And it's great that I get to talk to you a little bit about what we've been doing in our GS4S work package. What are we interested in? So first of all, we know that there are skill shortages. They affect a lot of different firms. What we are specifically interested in is multinationals. What do they do? And then what do they do that works? And we've been looking into this. So we look at specifically the sectoral variation. Well, you don't see it, but I'm pointing in M&E responses to skill shortages. It's something I've been working on together with Aisha and also Albert Rutte and Arjan Heeman have also, well, they're connected to the work package, so they'll present later, and all the other co-authors that I'm much obliged to. So what are we talking about? Skill shortages, and it's interesting that I get to start. So about half of all the firms in Europe, they say they face skill shortages. In the data set that we have, it's about 40%. So they say that they have business activities they cannot do because they cannot find the people to do it for them. And why is this happening? So this is happening against the backdrop of an aging workforce. I think by 2050, the estimates are that there will be 100 million fewer people inside Europe working in the workforce. That's quite a significant reduction. And at the same time, we're seeing that there is a change in the skills that are asked by firms. So we have more sustainability, that changes things, the green transition, and we have more digital work being done. So the nature of work is changing, which also means the nature of the skills that are required at these different firms is changing. And that is the backdrop against which skill shortages exist. So what is happening? There are a few things that are happening at a higher level. There's talent partnerships. So a lot of different countries, they have partnerships. For instance, one notable example is nurses being trained in their country of origin, then going to countries like Germany to nurse. And there's many different examples like that. There's also GS4 trade-in services. What does that mean? That means, for instance, a company in India temporarily detaching or sending one of their workers to Europe to, for instance, install a software system. And at the same time, there are employer-led initiatives. So Multinationals have many more things that they can do to combat skill shortages than SMEs. So they can transfer people within the firm, between locations, between countries. So that also happens to try to alleviate those skill shortages. Now, the firms themselves, they are an important part of the picture, but then again, so is the context in which they operate. So what is the institutional context? What are the rules? I gave you some examples already of mobility, for instance, intracorporate transfer. That is contingent on whether or not it is permissible to do that, whether or not it is easy to do this. Same with GS4. If those provisions from the World Trade Organization did not exist, then there would be no trade in services like that. So you have the multinational enterprises, also the SMEs, and they're situated in a particular business context. And we ask how, why, and with what effect do businesses fill skill shortages? This is our focus in this work package. Now, what did we do? We did a survey between March and September last year, where we asked a few thousand firms. It was not an easy ordeal. We asked them, what is the intensity of the skill shortages that you face? And about 40% of them say they face significant shortages. And what else did we ask? We asked them, oh, is there already a question? Okay, but we asked them, what did they do as a response? So it could be they use labor-saving technologies, for instance, AI, or anything else that falls under that bracket. They can do intracorporate transfers and so forth, short-term, long-term contracts. And then there's things that happen at the firm level, but also the regulations that I already spoke about. And what we're interested in the end is the success with which these responses have been applied, taking the context into account. So this is the survey. We have about 4,000 responses, 1,500 are MNEs, and we have 773 useful responses that I'll talk about in terms of what is happening there, what is successful, yes or no. And why are they useful? Because there's no missing data. Now, I don't want to make your head spin, so I put in the legend first, but we did what is called a qualitative comparative analysis. It's a fancy term for pattern recognition, basically. So we try to find the consistent patterns to firms successfully addressing skill shortages. The weakness here is that they self-report, so we don't see it in terms of actual business outcomes, but we see it in terms of the HR professional that answered our survey, our questionnaire, what they saw the success rate was of their interventions. And once we put in all the, and I'll show you in a moment, all the different conditions, including the responses that I talked about, we get a pattern recognition system. So we can see the combination of different responses, different contextual factors in terms of the institutions per sector, because we did the analysis per sector, of course. And then you get all these little spheres. So it's a bit complicated. What I will just say is that these are the patterns that exist in our data. And then we can say with some certainty, these are the ways in which firms become successful. And when it's a black circle, it's present. When it's crossed out, it's absent. But we have a much better way of showing this. So I'll hand off to my colleague, Isa.
Thank you so much, Daniel. That was a really nice background to it. So let's make this more digestible. But that is the raw output, just in case you were wondering where are the numbers backing this up. So what we have here is the green tick boxes are the strategies that firms are using in these we split it, basically divided into 4 different sectors, are using in pairs. So when you see in the IT sector, the green tick boxes, most of them are combining the response strategy of automation with accessing skills in a skill inflow initiative. It could be a skills partnership. These are, by the way, observed, and this is the fine-grained analysis that Daniel carried out, observed amongst particularly smaller multinationals in the IT sector. The larger ones are struggling with automation. It might be, we can only speculate because we haven't done subsequent sort of interviews, but it would be really interesting for future research to do so. Maybe they're struggling with inertia. There are set ways of operating. if they do not frequently use automation, then we notice that they tend to rely or they substitute automation by recruiting internationally from outside the EU. We have a similar pattern here amongst manufacturing firms. So here, though, instead of substituting lack of automation or limited use of automation with recruitment from outside the EU, they're actually participating in skills inflow initiatives. And that is particularly the case amongst manufacturing firms that are facing hard regulatory barriers, such as visa requirements. And when it comes to the healthcare sector, we noticed that there is this, again, pairing of automation with outsourcing and offshoring as a strategy means of filling skill shortages. And if there aren't sort of credible ways of closing the gap through access to skills through international migration within or outside the EU, there's more of a reliance on, we see, outsourcing and offshoring. And there is a similar trend in construction here, though there is even less significant emphasis on automation, which is interesting. It's pretty much a reliance on the primary mechanism of outsourcing and offshoring. What I like to do next is, of course, I don't have the time to go into illustrations of all of those pathways, but I thought this might come across as rather dry. Let's try and make it a bit juicier by providing examples. Real life examples. Now, this is not one of the companies, we're not sure, maybe they are, but we have no idea of knowing whether this company actually participated in the survey because this was all done anonymously. The survey company knows, but we don't. Capgemini, though, however, really does tick the conditions on the second pathway, that's this one here, of the IT sector. What we know of Capgemini, I think we've all heard of this company, is a large French multinational. They have been systematically looking for skills outside of the EU, and they do that through their Indian subsidiary. So when it comes to serving clients in the EU, such as telecoms, banks, insurance companies, even the public sector, these clients, they actually sign multiple and long sort of contracts with Capgemini, which then outsources the task to its Indian engineers. And these engineers are either recruited to be placed on site in Europe through short and long-term contracts, or there's offshore sort of delivery of the task to their clients. So that probably does illustrate it. Now, you might wonder about Capgemini, shouldn't they be automating, right? That was, if you go back, we have limited use of automation, and this is the general trend. However, we do see the pivoting of the company towards AI-driven solutions, and you can't ignore that pressure. So that is the limitation of the method that we're looking at. So you have a cross-sectional scenario, what companies have argued that they tend to emphasize in filling skill shortages, but their recent announcements concerning restructuring costs of 700 million suggests that there are also they're feeling that AI pressure and need to be, although it's a bit of a belated transition, but they need to be also on board automation. They're just being slower. The second example I want to share with you is the healthcare sector. Here we have Fresenius Medical Care is a German multinational. And they have, just to remind you maybe to go back to the healthcare as the first pathway. So this would cover companies that are combining or complementing automation with offshoring or outsourcing. So going back to this, Fresenius Medical Care, they are based in Germany. They're headquartered in Germany. They do cover both hospital operations. They have infusion therapy. They have IT solutions provided by their medical digital technology unit. The medical, 2 minutes? Okay, thank you. We're almost there. This particular unit has in-house IT capabilities. So you can see the types of things that they handle: IT governance, healthcare, domain-specific development, and so forth. Where they fall short, such as cloud migration, let's say, or coming up with a virtual assistant to help patients, they will be outsourcing, and they do partner with Capgemini to outsource those types of tasks. So they're using a combination of outsourcing as well as automation. And that brings me to my final slide. What are the policy implications of all of this? The biggest takeaway from the findings is that policymakers should be really explicitly designing their policies to treat automation and labor inflows as complements. What that suggests is that you would be pairing your bundling your funding and credential verification, such as subsidies that you might be providing with tax incentives, and focusing on projects that bring these two types of strategies together in a successful way. So demonstrable automation adoption and credible hiring pipelines, right? The sector-specific implication, we did say the smaller multinationals in the IT are the ones that readily automate. The larger ones are struggling with it. So you could, for instance, through EU AI funding, could be targeting those smaller multinationals to facilitate automation and allowing them access to shared platforms as testing grounds. In the manufacturing, we noticed in one of the pathways they face hard barriers. So you could alleviate those mobility constraints by offering fast track credential checking. Maybe these are things that are already known, but it kind of confirms the need for this even more strongly. And you can also offer incentives so that they automate a bit faster and pull with them these smaller MNEs through shared platforms. And in the health and construction sector, again, you could argue that maybe it is not such a positive development to see so many firms outsourcing or offshoring. And if you want to prevent that, you again need to be releasing some pressure by facilitating credential recognition and encourage workforce mobility. But at the same time, you could also say these firms are following a legitimate way of filling their skill shortages. So acknowledge that and formulate the regulations to ensure that these are done to a high quality standards and the workers are protected and there's accountability, right, in these arrangements. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our second presenters are from SEO in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and will share their insights on the small and medium size responses of the large-scale survey. I think it's the two of you presenting, or
yeah, I will.
You will start.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So the floor is yours.
Let me first. Oh, this actually works. It's also my biggest struggle is technology, while it's so important nowadays. Yes. You like here? Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you all for being here. Thank you for joining online. And Arjan and I from SEO have done some research on mainly small, medium-sized enterprises. But we also want to look first at some multinational firms to put it in a perspective. And one slide you already saw, but I want to get back to this, is the slides on MNEs and SMEs in terms of number of responses. So MNEs are smaller than SMEs. So there are a lot fewer multinational firms than small, medium-sized enterprise firm in this data set. This sort of makes sense because multinational firms are big. So my brother and I grew up in Beuningen, a dorp village near here, 23,000 citizens. ASML has more employees than people live in that village. They are big. But ASML also has approximately 4,000 to 5,000 SMEs supporting them in their production. The difference is that those people, those firms, are related to each other, yet are different in terms of the challenges they face. M&E, for instance, need very highly specialized personnel. When there's a trouble with highly skilled labor, multinational firms are the first to say, hey, we have a problem because we need to compete on the international market. For SMEs, this is somewhat different because they may not need the perfect skills to compete in the international market. And that's basically the first thing we focus on, because both SMEs and MNEs face skill shortages, and they think, well, there might be factors that help us in preventing that these skill shortages lead to trouble. And we've grouped them into two domains, and the first one is the domestic domain, and that basically goes on things, well, that you don't really need migration for. That's the way to see it. So the first thing is internal capacity. So if you have very well-trained staff, well, then maybe skill shortages are not that big of an issue, because people, they manage, they know what their priorities are, and then some things are less important, and then, yeah, skill shortage problem becomes less relevant. Another thing could be, well, there's a problem, we need to buy a machine, but we don't have the money. Once you have that money to buy a machine, skill shortages disappear. You can also already have the machine, but we need some time to make it work, to install all the software and so on. And then problems can also disappear. And the last one is always a little bit puzzling about measures taken by competitors. But the idea is that, yeah, of course, firms compete with each other. So how can they help mitigate skill shortages? Well, you can also copy from competitors. If they have a strategy that works, you can also copy that strategy, and then skill shortages may be less of a problem. Then the migration domain. Well, basically, the first tool, legal and administrative migration regulations, and employer-sponsored migration relates to once you want to get people to your company. So visa regulation, language requirements are things that need to sort of fit before people may enter. Residency rules is sort of pop up once they enter, because maybe people enter, but their spouse is not allowed to work because they have a nationality that cannot work in this country. So in Scandinavian countries, for instance, people from Russia are not able to work in every company. Now, then the question is, if we ask firms, well, which of these domains help you in mitigating skill shortages, we basically see two things. Well, the first thing that you see is basically that the red bar from multinational firms is always higher than the orange bar. And that makes somewhat sense, because multinational firms have a lot of employees, like a village. So it means that they can, well, have lots of options to tackle skill shortages. Well, when you're small, like one street of employees, well, maybe some things you can use, but others don't, because you simply don't have personnel that uses this. And the second thing that you notice is that for migration, and especially those two, is that for MNEs, it's almost double compared to SMEs. So migration is more prominent for multinational firms than for small, medium-sized enterprises. Well, then the next question is, well, if migration is not the channel to go to for small, medium-sized enterprises, what other channels are there? So we again make a schedule. So the first button you have, of course, is more labor and migration, which we talked about. Then the second one is the local labor strategy. You might say, well, we actually need more labor, but maybe we should stimulate later retirement or hire unemployed workers or whatsoever. And then there is another category, namely more efficient labor. So you say, well, we have this current stock of labor, but we need some other things to make them more efficiently. It's like automation. So if we have ChatGPT to write all our emails, they can actually do the important stuff, for instance. Another channel could be training. Well, we have a current workforce, we have a current set of skills, but we need to upskill them, or we need to reskill them to work with the latest technology such that they remain productive. And then we ask firms, SMEs now, what actually do you use across 4 European countries? And what we see is that the black bar, the training strategy, is most often used. And then the local labor strategy comes in second. Then the follow-up question is, well, maybe you use those strategies, but maybe you actually want to use another strategy, but there is no government or regulation or institutional framework that helps you. So maybe, yeah, of course you do training, but maybe you want to do migration, but yeah, I have all these very complicated documents. I cannot fill them in. So I'm sort of doomed to invest in training because the other strategy is not possible. So we also ask in the survey, well, where do you need help from the government to help you with tackle skill shortages? And then we also observe that strengthening vocational education in black and subsidies for training programs in gray are basically in the top 2 in most countries. So actually the strategies SMEs implement, investing in training, is also what they want to see from the government. Well, and then we have one sort of final slide to summarize our findings. So we started with a story on SMEs and MNEs, that they are both important for the economy, yet they serve a somewhat different market, that they both face skill shortages, but migration is more prominent for MNEs than for SMEs. So SMEs rather focus on local labor market strategies or training, and that's also what they want the government to do to help them tackle skill shortages. And that's basically the key findings from our research so far. So thank you all for your attention, and we're looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much. This very concise and clear presentation on the SME part. Now I'd like to move on to the, unless there are questions of clarification. I think it was quite clear, and we'll have the opportunity in a moment as well to reflect on these. I'd now like to move to our colleagues from Switzerland, and I'm just looking to the list of online participants. I see Mariana Alvarado Chavez is with us from Switzerland.
Good afternoon, everyone. So indeed, my name is Mariana Alvarado. I am a researcher at the University of Geneva, and I am presenting joint work with Professor Sandra Lavene, who is also joining us remotely. And so we use the survey that many of you participated in to study what we call non-standard transnational mobility. So we start from the acknowledgement that access to skilled workers is an ongoing challenge for companies in advanced democracies, as has already been discussed. And this is not only a problem of competition or insufficient supply, but also of regulatory hurdles in a context in which immigration restrictions are quite common. And so we're interested in companies' use of new non-standard hiring strategies to access foreign labor that are perhaps not so visible, but that seem to be becoming widespread. And what these non-standard forms of mobility have in common is that they all allow workers to work temporarily in a host country without legally entering its labor market. And the question that we try to answer in this project is, what are the conditions under which companies opt for these kinds of contracts as compared to standard long or short-term work contracts? What are these non-standard forms of mobility? We are interested specifically in intra-corporate transferees, contractual service suppliers, EU posted workers, and digital nomads. And these all operate under different legal frameworks and apply to different regions. The first two are regulated within trade agreements. Intra-corporate transferees are, as has already been mentioned, employees of a multinational company who move from one branch to another branch of the same company in another country while retaining their work contract at home. And so this can be used both within and outside the EU. And under EU and national laws, they can work and live for up to 5 years in another country without formally entering its labor market, while retaining their work contract and social insurances at home. CSS, contractual service suppliers, are deployed to a country to do a specific job for a shorter period, typically up to 1 year, while their work contract remains also in their country of origin. And they usually come from outside the EU, with posted workers more or less being the EU version of contractual service suppliers. And finally, while all of these types of workers migrate physically to work in another country while remaining legally employed in their home country, digital nomads, as you all know, work in another country remotely while living anywhere. And so what do these all have in common? This is actually quite a heterogeneous group that covers different skill levels, different company types, different areas of origin. However, what they have in common is that they provide companies with a way to access foreign labor without formally employing it in the local labor market. And this allows companies to access skilled workers, to reproduce their business model, and to do so often at a lower cost and through facilitated immigration procedures. So these forms of mobility are characterized by the fact that they are triggered by the firms and not by workers themselves, right? It's the firms who decide to transfer an intracorporate transferee to a different branch, or to strike a contract with a company in another country to import a contractual service supplier or posted worker, or to directly hire a nomad who will work from abroad. And so since these types of contracts are initiated by companies, it is their perspective that is particularly interesting, and that is what we are studying here. So in that sense, we're interested in understanding when companies will resort to these hiring strategies in their efforts to fill skill shortages. And we have three key expectations. First, that they will do so when skill shortages are acute. Second, when regulatory constraints to access foreign workers are high. And third, when they are trying to reduce their hiring costs. And to test these expectations, we use data from the survey in which many of you participated. And in particular, we use responses from SMEs and MNEs in Switzerland, Germany, and the Netherlands, which are three highly internationally integrated economies. And we focus specifically on survey questions asking how often companies hired workers using the mobility schemes that we are interested in, and also questions asking about the legal regulations and government support more relevant to their efforts to solve skill shortages. So moving on to our findings, this figure shows the share of companies reporting to frequently or always hiring workers from abroad using different types of contracts. And in addition to our contracts of interest, we include standard long and short-term contracts for comparison. And this figure provides several insights. First, even though these types of contracts do not figure prominently in public debates, we find that they are actually quite widespread, with companies reporting to use them to hire workers from abroad with almost the same frequency as they use standard short-term contracts. And while it is often thought that it is primarily multinational enterprises that make use of these hiring strategies, we find that they are also frequently used by small and medium enterprises. It's true, as we can see, that small and medium enterprises use them to a lesser extent than MNEs, but they also use them almost as much as regular short-term contracts. We can also see that among the companies facing skill shortages in the sample, both MNEs and SMEs report hiring workers from outside the EU less frequently than from within it. That said, among those MNEs and SMEs who do hire outside the EU, these types of contracts are used roughly at the same rates, if not somewhat higher, as within the EU. All of which is to say that these mobility schemes are quite widespread. So we use regression analyses to identify the key predictors of using these types of contracts. And we find that within countries, companies are more likely to use these strategies if they report more severe skill shortages, as we had anticipated. And also for SMEs, if they are more internationalized, as measured by their share of sales abroad. And the type of skills and sector are also found to matter here. In terms of our second expectation, we also find evidence consistent with it, as companies are more likely to use these strategies if they report recognition as sponsor, visa regulations, country-specific quotas, and immigration facilitation as relevant to their efforts to address skill shortages. So all of this is consistent with our expectation that they rely on these strategies when facing high regulatory hurdles. Our final expectation was that companies trying to reduce hiring costs were more likely to use them. And here again, we also find supportive evidence, as companies are more likely to rely on these schemes if they highlight or if they mention cost considerations as important in their efforts to address skill shortages, including high salary thresholds, support for childcare, and subsidized housing. We were also interested in understanding when companies chose to use these strategies to access workers from outside the EU specifically, and not just from within it. And what we found was that companies are more likely to do so when they report more severe skill shortages and when they express concerns over high salary thresholds. We also found that MNEs are more likely to hire from outside the EU than SMEs. So to sum up, we find that these non-standard hiring strategies are quite widespread, that they are used not only by MNEs, but also by SMEs, and in particular by companies dealing with severe skill shortages, facing high regulatory constraints, and expressing concerns about cost considerations. And also that more severe shortages and cost considerations increase the likelihood of hiring from outside the EU. And we want to finish by noting that the spread of these types of contracts not only puts workers in a situation of greater vulnerability vis-a-vis their employers, but also raises equity considerations in the workplace, both of which need to be addressed through more up-to-date regulatory frameworks. Thank you for your attention, and we look forward to hearing whether this resonates with your own experience.
Thank you very much for this very insightful presentation on a different perspective offered to this project as well, looking at the non-standard transnational mobility arrangement. We're actually doing very well on the timing, so I would like to offer my compliments to the presenters for being very concise and clear. We have about 10 minutes remaining for any questions, if there may be, for clarification to the speakers. I think we will have ample opportunity to reflect more deeply on how this resonates in practice after the break. I also want to give the online participants the opportunity to raise questions if there may be any points that they would like to have specific clarifications. So I'm just looking around the room if there are specific questions that you would like to address. We're not so much time limited, so please go ahead, and then I'll cut the discussion whenever necessary. Ksenia, are there reflections online?
Yes, we have one hand that is raised by Izabela Grabowska. And I had a question of my own to all speakers, or perhaps Aisha, what would be like the biggest limitations of the survey? Because that's something that I feel like was discussed relatively less. And thank you all for sharing the results. It was great to hear them. Mm-hmm. And yes, Isabella, perhaps should she also ask the question directly, or is that better?
Yes, so Isabella, could you formulate your question yourself?
Thank you very much, and congratulations to Sister Project on the great survey. I am the scientific leader of the Sister Project of Link for Skills. We also had a survey, but with migrants, and they are drivers and motivations, and then post-migration practices. But my question more relates to your survey and especially findings, because you started with discussing labor shortages, and we know that automation is a great solution to decrease, from our analysis and modeling, vacancy rates, but it will create a lot of underutilization of skills. So saying that, we know that automation is never standing alone solution, but we also learned from the big modeling exercise that migration as well is not a solution. So migration won't bring any remedy for skill shortages in the European Union unless it's very targeted, selective solution. But at scale, to bring remedies for aging societies, underutilization of skills, and growing automation, migration is not a solution. So my question is, have you tested within your findings, because your findings are from very important stakeholders, namely medium and small enterprises, what would be the possible policy mix or option mix for them? Maybe in the sequence, maybe in the time perspective, yes? Because one of our main message from three sister projects, which we are planning to hammer out, is to bring a conclusion that we need a policy mix or answers mix, yes, that it will be automation along reskilling, upskilling, along selective targeted migration through, for instance, skill partnership. My question is very important here. To what extent are you able to learn about these possible answers from the employer's perspective? I think it would be crucial. Thank you very much and congratulations again.
Thank you, Isabella. I think your question is clear. I think there actually connects directly to at least two presentations that we've heard. I will also make sure we'll take it back to the session after the break, because this is where we're going to reflect on this a bit more from the practice side.
Unfortunately, I cannot stay after the break. So if you can bear with this question, it would be great. Then I can listen to the reports.
Yeah. Yes. So would you like to respond, Aisha and Albert, briefly?
Maybe I could get started. Thank you so much for the question. It's highly valid. And this is exactly what we want to do, looking at that mix. In terms of the strategies that are pursued by SMEs, but also what they imply for policy, and that very much can result in a policy mix type of a solution in a third paper, which we haven't yet started, but it's something that we want to do applying the same method, but only to the SME data. So I see the need, but that would be a discussion to be had maybe in 3 to 4 months' time when we have the people ready.
Yeah.
In terms of the automation and the underutilization of skills, so with the Capgemini example, for instance, the restructuring costs of 700 million euros are actually channeled to reskilling, right? Upgrading these skills and all sorts of initiatives related to that. So the companies, I think, are very much aware of what automation can do, and this is why they're trying to bring people, their existing resources, along with it. So I recognize the issue. Thank you.
Would you like to add to this?
Yeah. So I think also in combination with the question you asked, I think one of the limitations of this data set is it's sort of cross-sectional. So you only observe one point in time. And maybe if you want to see how things evolve over time, things might become clearer, because it could be the case, for instance, that firms think they are now very successful in what they're doing, but 2 years from now, they do not exist anymore because it may not have been that successful. But then you need some sort of you need to follow these firms over time to get an answer to that question. And then related to the online question on the ideal policy mix, I think it's also good to realize that you have different sectors who also may have different needs in that sense, so that the optimal policy mix may also depend on the sector. Like, very simple example, it's not entirely in this survey, but it paints a very good picture. If you have the agricultural sector, they also rely now on migration, and ASML, high tech, also relies on migration, but they rely on different types of migration. And maybe the type of migration the agricultural sector relies on is easier to automate than the type of migration that ASML is relying on. And therefore, these institutional or sector-specific constraints play a big role in this policy mix.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thanks, Albert, very much also for immediately addressing the other question that we have from Xenia. Welcome also to Tessitje de Lange, a professor in migration law, who is the co-lead of the GS4S project. We have a question here from the on-site participants. Yes.
I have actually 2 or 3 questions, but maybe
let's start with the first.
I was just curious, first of all, the first presentation, how do you define exactly the skill inflow initiatives? I was just curious so that we have the same understanding, and then I can ask the other questions afterwards.
Yeah, I can jump in there. So it also ties into the first question that Ksenia asked in terms of weaknesses, but it's self-reported. So the strength of the survey is the reach and the diversity in terms of responses. And we ask a lot of things, and one of them is, do you participate in skill partnerships, basically? And the weakness then is that we assume the respondent, we did target HR professionals, so they have some say in terms of hiring strategy and what to do. So they should know these things, but we're assuming that they do, yes.
Okay, and then maybe my second question links to this first one with to your reply, because you said that the HR specialists, they replied to the survey, right? How was it to be in contact with them, to reach them? Because also, for example, representing SMEs, usually it's super complicated to have even HR departments or people really working on the HR issues. How was the process of finding them?
Mix. So we relied on survey companies as well. So I don't know if we can name them or not, but I can tell you later as well. But the thing is, they have panels of
Experts.
Yeah, experts basically, and that includes HR personnel. So they have the ability to select exactly the type of firm that we were interested in, and of course diversity of firms. And they knew that these would be HR professionals because they're a member of their data panel basically. And then we paid them to disseminate the survey. It's not the only approach that we had. We also had the standard questionnaire sent via email or via mail or even letters. And that did not work in every context. So for instance, in the Dutch context, then there was a second wave of collecting data. And the first wave was via letters, basically with a link to the survey. And the second one was via a panel in a different company that supplied these firms.
If I could just compliment Daniel's response. With the HR professionals, we really had to ensure that these were the individuals who really were involved in HR-related activities. So there's a question in the survey that asks how often they make HR decisions or whether they co-decide with others. So they had to select one of those options.
Yeah, and in case they weren't, then they were dropped.
Yeah.
So they didn't get to do the survey. They had to have some say in HR decisions, otherwise they're not useful to us.
I think this is the final question we had in this first panel round. I just had to check. I don't think we have any further online questions. So we're perfect in schedule. We'll have a 15-minute break now. Coffee break here physically. Online participants, please grab your own cup. And we will continue at 2:45 with a second panel, which is bringing in the reflectivity from practice to these scholarly findings we've just heard about. See you in a bit. Okay, well, thanks for being back. We're now shifting from research to practice, and I'm very thrilled that I can moderate this panel with three speakers, three participants. So it's an interactive format. And my challenge will be to, of course, let the speakers address a number of questions that we have thought about, but also introduce themselves and how they and their organizations positioned in this debate. And at the same time, also inviting interventions from the physical audience here and the online audience. So if I could ask my colleagues to flag if there are responses or questions being addressed online, and then we can take them on board as well. Yeah, let me briefly introduce the speakers, and then I would like the three speakers. We have two here with us in Nijmegen, and we have Lies. I'm just checking. Lies, are you there online?
Yeah, I'm here.
Our participant. Okay, so I will briefly introduce you, and then I would like to ask you to introduce yourself a little bit and your organization and how what brings you here, what is, kind of your motivation to be engaged in this discussion, and then we'll move from there. So to introduce the speakers briefly, we have online Lies Valsalu, who is the head of global mobility at Bolt, with ample experience across the HR domain, particularly learning and development, immigration and relocation. Great to have you, Lies, and welcome to the panel. We have Larissa Panay, is that correct?
No.
No? How do you pronounce it?
It's Panay.
Panay, okay. Who is from Eurochambers today, and she's a policy advisor for skills. And you're leading, plenty of initiatives. I think you're the coordinator of the Eurochambers working group on skills and education, training, also entrepreneurship and migration. There's a very broad number of areas of expertise. And great to have you here with us. Our third panelist is Ruud Blaakman, who is here from the Netherlands and who is head of the International Labor Advisory Unit at the werkgeversvereniging AWVN. And I've been thinking, what's the English equivalent? So the Employer Association?
Yes, Employers Association, then AWVN.
Is it just like that? Okay, because sometimes you have an English equivalent, but okay, we won't make it more complex. Thank you for joining us here today. And perhaps, Lies, could I ask you to briefly introduce your motivation and what relates your daily work to our discussion here today?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for inviting. It has been really nice to participate today and listen your learnings from the survey. For me, based on that I'm located in Estonia and Bolt HQ is also located in Estonia, then of course it is a really interesting topic. And also I would say that one thing that I've seen is that the migration is more and more a hot topic in the governmental institutions as well at the moment, because of course the trends are showing that we don't have enough workforce in the future. And also at Bolt, we're already seeing that we don't just have the skilled employees in Estonia, as we're a small country, and you just need to find a good balance between different scenarios. And that's why it was very interesting to hear that what the survey showed about what other companies are also using for that, because like every other company, we're trying to find the best fit for us. So we're constantly learning.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much, Lies. How about Larissa?
Yes.
What brings you here?
So first of all, nice to meet you. Also online, I'm Larissa Panay. I'm Romanian. This is why you pronounce it like this. So I work at the Eurochambers. I would say that also Eurochambers is a SME. I think it also helps a bit with the discussion. This is why I'm also covering so many topics. We are not very many people in the organization. So when I talk about different topics, I cover skills development, education and training, indeed also entrepreneurship education, and also migration from the perspective of attracting talent. And at Eurochambers, we represent European associations related to the chambers of commerce and industry in 38 countries. So we work both in the EU and also outside the EU. And our direct members are the chambers, but through them we represent around 20 million businesses. And most of these businesses, most of these companies are actually SMEs. And even if I look further, there are even micro enterprises, so even companies with less than 10 employees. And why I'm here, what is the motivation behind it? We have a survey that we also do every single year at our chambers. We call it the Economic Eurochambers Survey. I think this is the full name, but yeah, I will have to check exactly the full name. And every year we ask these companies that we represent what are the challenges that they see for the next year that they would face. And I think for the past 5 years, one of the main challenges, top 3, is really the lack of skilled workers. So we see directly in the companies that they say that this is one of the main challenges. We also see a lot of labor costs and also regulatory burden. So usually these are the main 3 ones. And I think the survey that we did for like the last edition covered around 40,000 businesses all over Europe. So the motivation here, again, it also comes from this challenge that the businesses see, but also through my daily work that I talk with experts from these different chambers and from companies directly talking about shortages that they experience, also how they can work better with the providers, for example, or even with universities, and also looking into the migration sides. Many companies, they are quite involved depending on the country. They have some projects maybe or initiatives, but in some other countries, they are not really aware, so they want to learn more. And in some other countries, they are not even aware, or they don't even think as a strategy, as you call it in your survey. So this is a bit my motivation to learn, also from you.
Thank you. Very interesting. I'm immediately reflecting on the presentations we had before the break, and I think our colleagues from Switzerland identified exactly these 3 items as motivators for engaging in skills shortage strategies. So that was an interesting. But we'll come back to that. Ruud, what brings you here?
Invitation from Arjan.
Yes, so that's immediate.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm from AWVN. That's an employers organization in Den Haag. We're the biggest member of VNO-NCW. VNO-NCW does more in general lobbying with government, influencing and seeing in a broad perspective enterprise prices in the Netherlands. They are also for multinationals and MKB organizations. We service them with a lot of services like collective labor agreement data, but also with the technical part of legislation, mainly on the HR field. And as far as international secondment, for example, concerns, we help our members with preventing liability when they send people out abroad or want to get them legally working in the Netherlands. That's it short.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I would like to then go to the first question that we have formulated here. If we could perhaps have it. Yes, thank you. So before the break, we've looked at the some key insights from the research that has been implemented on the basis of the large-scale survey. And I would like to ask the panelists to reflect on this. I mean, are these key findings, do they resonate with your practice of the member organizations that you're representing, the interactions with members, the practice at Bolt, a large multinational company? Are there issues that you identify as surprising, potentially contrasting with your daily experiences? Yeah, I think that would be a nice start of our discussion. Maybe Larissa, there were a couple of points that I saw immediate connections to what we heard before the break. So maybe you could start us out.
Yes, sure. No, thank you for the question and also for the survey, actually, for the work that you did. I also had before some questions, and I think maybe there are also some limitations, or I still have some questions to see if I understand correctly the results. Like I asked before about the inflow talents initiatives, how do you define them? I also had a question on the HR specialists and how did you reach them? Because also through our work on a daily basis, whenever we talk about representation of companies and mostly SMEs, as I mentioned before, it's very hard for them. They don't even have HR departments most of the time. If they do, they have someone, maybe they work part-time. Even in my own organization, we have someone who is working part-time, and I wouldn't count the person as a full HR person. And whenever you have all these details, you know, even looking at the survey, maybe you also didn't reach those proper SMEs in quotes, or even the larger majority of SMEs, or even, as I said before, micro enterprises. But looking aside a bit from these comments that I had before, and also a bit, I was asking during the break about how did you choose the sectors, because of the shortages. I understood also when we look in our chambers and also through the companies that we work with, as I told you, it's a bit that we look all over Europe, so the situation is a bit different in each country. But what we observed is that when we talk about shortages, they differ, but most of them usually they are really related to vocational training professions. And this was quite an interesting association that I've seen also within the, I think, last presentation, which mentions the need from companies to the government of strengthening or improving the vocational training system in the countries, right, from the government. And I think this is a very important point for us, and I think we resonate a lot with this, because whenever we talk about shortages, most of them, again, they are in vocational training professions, and we have to work more on this. In some countries, I mean, in Germany, in Switzerland, you know, in Luxembourg, in Austria, we have very strong dual education systems, so the best system. But in other countries, this is not the reality, and we have to strengthen it. Another point with which I also resonate a lot, it's this idea that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. I think it's very different. Also, us as an association, we represent different sectors, so not just one or two or three. And I think it really differs also from the country, as I said before, even the region, because maybe in some regions you really focus a lot on, you know, maybe tourism, and then how do you adapt to all the changes. Even in our own organization, we were doing some position papers on, you know, even aligning holiday, how do you call them, the holidays, seasons, because this also has a lot of impact on how many people are coming and how many people do you need to have working in the hotels, in the restaurants, and so on. So everything is quite connected. And I would also say that I think also reflects in your survey that indeed SMEs and large companies, they do not experience the same skill shortages, and also they don't have the same approach as I was mentioning before. You know, the big companies, usually they tend to have larger resources, maybe they have these HR departments, they can recruit internationally, maybe they know how to deal with what kind of documents do I need, you know, to recruit someone, or where do I look? Or I have the resources indeed to hire a company, and then they will deal with all these other things. But with SMEs or even micro enterprises, we don't really see all these details. So for them, it's quite difficult to do it. And then maybe one last point, and then I will finish with this. I think I also resonate a lot with this idea of responsiveness to what is happening, to the skills, how do you call them, transfer, let's say, from maybe what was needed a few years ago to what is needed now, what will be needed in, I don't know, 5, 10, 12 years from now on, in terms of green, digital transition. And I have here an example from Germany, actually, from the chamber, where we had different companies approaching the chamber saying that, look, we are looking for people with skills related to AI and machine learning, and we can't find them. So what can we do here? And then the chamber worked together with the companies to understand the needs, what they wanted, and then they worked with the academia and also with the vet providers to develop curricula on this AI and machine learning. So I think that was a very good example that can be scaled, also maybe in the same, you know, country, but also in other countries, where you bring together the companies, the needs, and also work together with academia and also with the vet providers to have this updated curricula. So then you have the right people with the right skills that can go later on in the labor market. So maybe I will stop here, so then I don't talk too much. Then I can bring some other points later.
No, I wrote already half a page of questions I would like to follow up on.
Okay.
Thank you very much for getting us started. But how does this resonate, Ruud, from your perspective? You're also representing a large number of employers. We discussed before different scale, different size levels of employers as well. How does it resonate?
Yeah, well, when I give presentations or when I are asked to give my opinion, I'm always compared with a priest, because I try to convince people that they have to have certain faith in business. That's why I have my own Bible with me, and I prepared some answers.
Yeah.
Because the question is, do I recognize these results from my member companies, for my big and small companies, RIVN and VNO represent? And what we've seen so far, and perhaps it's not a priest-like saying, but size really does matter. So there are differences between multinationals and small companies. But before I come to that detail, I want to go into the 6 different adjustment margins that were in the research. We have internal capacity, implementing challenge, and measures taken by competitors. And we have 3 others concerning how institutions shape migration policy, and they are legal and administrative regulations, employer-sponsored migration, and residency rules. And to my opinion, those 3 last points from the research, to my knowledge, they are all the same. They are all the same, meaning that either it be small companies or multinationals, they all face with the fact that the employees that they try to attract have to work legally in a country. And the main problem they face is that it's a very big obstacle to work legally in a country, in a company, especially currently in the Netherlands. So they deal with a lot of hassle in that. And instead of 6 margin, perhaps we only have 4. Speaking for the Netherlands, speaking for big and small companies, we see a long-lasting shortage of staff on high and low level. Demographic research shows that it will last for a decade until 2050, 2060, and we have to deal with it. But in the Netherlands, at least, and that's why I want to. I found the sheets on the comparison between the countries very interesting. Contrary to the fact that we need a lot of persons, high and low skill, the Netherlands closes the market. We have no options for attracting a non-EU staff. We have, of course, options for EU nationals, but only less than 3% makes use of migration in the EU. Within 31 countries, we only have less than 3% migration. Nevertheless, the Netherlands treats that migration very discriminatory because we don't even try to provide proper housing for them. So as we come to non-EU nationals, we have closed the labor market. We only have a system for recognized sponsors for highly qualified staff who earn €6,000 gross a month. But for the rest, you cannot get a permit. So that's a big problem in Holland. And to my opinion, that topic should be tackled. And that's why I'm so interested in the comparison between other countries who are more favorable in a certain way. Another point I remarked from the start was that we have multinationals and small-sized companies, but both do need high-skilled migrant workers. When the scheme for sponsorship was introduced in the Netherlands, it first was only open for multinationals. But then due to involvement of the MKB, the small company firms, they say, yeah, we also need specialists, but not on such a volume as the multinationals do. So that's why it was opened also for small-sized companies. And as you see, all the companies that now are listed by the E&A, they are big and small companies. So not only big companies. So that's it for now.
That's a good starting point. Thank you very much, Ruud. And it wasn't too much preaching for me. I was noting down some items, but I think also this is a particular reflectivity from the Netherlands as well, of course, so that you have been provided. I'd like to also ask Elise, you're based in Estonia, and you have a particular company perspective, multinational company perspective, company operating globally. I'm curious to hear how this resonates with you. Do you recognize the findings from this research, and also feel free to already respond to what the other panelists have been indicating?
Yeah, sure. I definitely resonate with the results, because even though we have like 4,000 plus employees divided between more than 45 different countries at the moment, then our HQ is in Estonia, and we try to keep our global roles in the HQ, which means that we have around 1,400 employees in Estonia, and a lot of employees divided between Europe and Africa on top of that. So definitely one thing that has been affecting us is constantly changing immigration rules around the globe, because as any other tech company, we always try to make our location strategies while thinking about also the immigration and obstacles in that field. But currently we're seeing that we can make some policies and the ideas, but in a couple of months, the situation is already changing, which has been the new normality for the couple of years. Also, we're seeing that as Bolt was startup for a while, and in Estonia, for example, immigration has different rules for startups, it was really easy to relocate. But now when we're a bigger company, we're not the startup anymore, then the rules have changed for us as well, which is also limiting our options to relocate, which has made us to automate more, to think about what we can solve with the AI. But we still continue to relocate quite a lot. But our main focus currently is relocating to Estonia. So we have limited some other locations for now. And based on the Estonian location and also what has happened since, I would say, 2022 with all the economical changes with prices in Estonia and so on, then of course, unfortunately, we are not the attractive location for EU talents, which again was also visible in your survey, that if we need to hire somebody from abroad, it's most probably a non-EU country where they're coming from. Because of course our neighbor Russia can make Estonia unattractive for some people. Also, the prices are getting high and the salaries are quite stable. And of course, people, when they make that kind of big life decisions, they're looking into that data as well. And as a tech company, of course, we need to compete with all the big tech companies in Germany, Netherlands, UK. So that's why it's pretty hard. But we're trying our best, and also as a small country, we are really aware that whatever we want to do, there won't be all of that talent in Estonia, even if the universities will change a lot of their curriculums. We just don't get all the specific talent from Estonia. So now we have been putting more and more effort also to internship programs, grad projects that we offer, like 2-year contract for people to, I would say, grow into their position inside of the company, to grow more those like talents inside of the company and to get, I would say, more stability from that side, because relocating is a really good thing and you can get a lot of like specific knowledge into the company. But migration is getting, I would say, slower and slower with all those changes. And Estonia was one of the locations where, for example, in 2019, when I still worked at the agency, you could bring somebody from, for example, from India to Tallinn within a month. But now it takes 4 to 5 months, and it's a really big difference for a company because typically you need this person like right now. So I would say we definitely feel the same things that the survey is showing.
Very, very interesting. Thank you very much. And I think we're already entering the second question that we wanted to address. We could share that one with the audience as well. Are there interventions from the online participants or the participants here present in Nijmegen? Yeah, please.
Steal from the time
No, but
our
yeah.
valued experts, but I was just wondering, really, how is AI exactly being used to facilitate?
Yeah, I had the exact same question as well. I was wondering where automation and AI come in, because we've heard about training, we've heard about EU, non-EU recruitment, etc. Lies, would you like to respond to that? Could you hear the question from Aise?
Yeah, I heard. So I can definitely say that I don't know about all the teams at the company because we have so many teams and they have their own AI initiatives based on the teams. But one thing that we're seeing also in our people team and other teams that we're cooperating with is that for example, with AI, the automations between systems is getting so much easier and faster, and you don't have to know engineering anymore to make those kind of things happen. So currently, we have been trying to, I would say, get rid of those manual tasks as much as possible, so we wouldn't have to, I don't know, do some reporting or some click somewhere just the sake of like doing that. But if we can automate the systems as much as possible, then we're already, I would say, winning back so much time, because I've also seen that there were some really good and really needed reporting and analytics happening that for an employee, it took days to get like the monthly reporting up to date. Now with the support of AI, it takes an hour. So if we can like win time back from this kind of tasks, it can mean that we can grow, but we don't need to hire that much anymore.
Can I just have a very quick follow-up?
Yeah.
I was wondering whether you actually use AI to match skills to vacancies within the company.
To be honest, I'm not sure about that, so I don't want to give a wrong like answer here. So maybe I can look into that and share the knowledge in a long run. But yeah, I don't want to give a wrong answer here.
Yeah.
Maybe another.
Yes.
Because does AI really saves on labor in your company, or does it give more opportunities that you will need more, but then other labor?
Maybe this is we can also invite the other panelists on the basis of the interactions with members, because Liz is being put on the spot on an area that's not her core expertise, I think. From your experience in interacting with your members, is this, an area of discussion that you're having, or?
Yeah, we are having it because we look into labor productivity, of course, and we have seen that in the past, automatization, making use of computers, will reduce the need of staff. Well, we have seen the contrary. We will need more staff, and we need more qualified staff. And I think the same goes for AI. And now they all say we all will be fired. We don't need lawyers anymore because AI does the work. Well, I will not take an example for the organization of today, but AI can make mistakes, of course. And I think it will create more opportunities in the end. So it will not reduce jobs.
Interesting. Any reflection from Eurochambers, from your work there?
From my reflection, maybe not a direct reply to you, but linked to it, because we also had a project looking into if SMEs are using AI, for example, or if they know about it. And initially, we did also a small survey within this project. I think we had around 600 or 700 replies to that. And in the beginning of the project, we saw that actually SMEs, they don't even use or they don't know about AI. This was like 2 years ago. I think now things are also a bit more advanced. And then we created some training materials for them to be up to date, to see a bit how can they use it, how they can incorporate it. So I don't know if indeed at the end, it will add to the cost or not, or if it maybe they will need other people to do them. But in the beginning, they were not even aware of these AI tools that exist. So I think this is also a very important tool that usually, even within SMEs, maybe they can't even afford to use AI tools, or if they do, they do the general ones. Then you have other issues like GDPR. How do you use it for what exactly, and then also if it's correct or not, as you mentioned before. So a bit, I would say, take a step back from your question. Yeah.
Moving to question 2. In the research, we have been taken on board various sectors, and particularly Ruud and Larissa, you are representing members from various sectors as well. We found some distinct patterns, let's say, for the various sectors, so IT, construction, manufacturing. In your experiences with companies in the field, do you see different patterns in engaging with strategies for meeting skill shortages, or are these not so visible to you?
Well, if you compare construction and healthcare, then you see that both activities cannot be exported easily. You have a bridge to build in Denmark, and you don't build that in Holland, for example. You have to take care of all the people in Holland, and you don't do that in Spain. Although we have from the Nordic countries have some examples that they do take care of Swedish, Norwegian people in Spain, of course, but it's not so easy to expand that. We have several tries to attract Indonesian nurses for the Netherlands, and that gives a lot of hassle because of agencies not taking care of them properly, as for the payment of salary, of course. But another obstacle is that in order to have hands on the bed, you need a big registration, which is a big obstacle to be allowed to work in medical field. If you can take away that part, then it would be far more easy to attract persons. Another example is language skills. We've seen from Ukrainian employees, Ukrainian people coming to the Netherlands, 50 to 60% is at work at the moment. Why? Because only notification to an employer is needed with UWV, and they can start. In Germany, they have to be able to speak German before they can start. So the participation rate is far more lower in Germany. So those are examples that hamper persons to work easily in another country.
I agree with some of the points that you made. I think with all of them, actually. Mm-hmm. But maybe just to add to what you said before, just because we also look into a lot of this collaboration between companies and vet providers or even universities, for us, one of the transferable, let's say, strategies indeed to strengthen these vocational training systems, where it's very strong to continue it, but where it doesn't exist to try to work on it. And I think here there is also the idea of companies really being involved in designing the curricula and being co-creators. So not only just end receivers, but also be there from the beginning. And I think with this is also associated the idea of the attractiveness of some sectors. Okay, maybe it's super attractive to work in the IT field. You have a, let's say, very fair, good paid job. Maybe you have good conditions. In some countries, for example, in Romania, you even had some tax reductions, right? If you work in the IT sector, but how attractive it is to work in the construction sector or health sector. I think this also adds a bit to this issue of maybe not having, maybe here the labor shortage, not necessarily the skill shortage. But I think they're very much linked. I would say maybe something which is not transferable as much is also this idea of not only recognizing qualifications, but also validating skills that you acquired from other environments. I think maybe in some fields it's working quite well, but maybe in construction, no, maybe you really need, the qualifications that you earn, especially also in the medical field, because otherwise you can't really go somewhere else with some experience that you, I don't know, watched a video on YouTube. But in other fields, this is a bit more possible. You also maybe did the internship, as someone was mentioning before, or you did a volunteering program and then you earn some skills there. So in some fields, you can take this, but in others, I don't think that is possible. So I think this one, for example, is not necessarily applying to different sectors. And then indeed, we also talk about the recognition of qualifications and how fast it is to move, even within the EU, not even outside from the EU, because we're also talking with some members to have some inputs for the upcoming skills portability initiative, which will be launched by the Commission. They did a public consultation. So we also looked a bit into our members and their inputs, and we were just seeing a bit of a different situation in each country. In Germany, just because I know Germany is also one of your focus country, they were even talking that now with this new immigration act, they not necessarily relaxed the rules, but improved them. So if you come from the outside EU, they have a database where they can check your qualification, and they can even partially recognize it. So it's not necessarily fully, partially, and then they can provide some training, or they will say, okay, you have to take this kind of training to reach the level that we want. And this is quite, I think it's a useful thing. Or you can also come from outside the EU and do an apprenticeship for 1 year. You just go there and do it. Of course, then there is also the question of, can you stay in the country afterwards? Can you find a job and so on? But maybe in other countries, maybe this idea, they're not even there as much. And I had at some point a discussion, so not from our members, but I think it's interesting for the conversation, with IOM Slovakia. And then they were mentioning that the government, because they had this list of shortages, they created special industry visas. So where they had the shortage, they created a visa especially for this. But for me, I also had questions, okay, what is happening when you don't have the shortage anymore? Do you send the people back? What is happening? There were also these questions that people were coming to Slovakia, but then they were going to other countries, especially in the West or the North of Europe. So that was also one interesting thing that I had, but maybe, okay, creating industry visas is also not transferable across the sectors. So maybe just reflections for now.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Liz, your company is working in the tech sector. So it's one of the sectors that we have been focusing on this project. Do you notice specific, sectoral initiatives that your company or other companies in the sector are using that may be different, or that may actually be transferable to other sectors? It's a very open question, I recognize, but I'm just seeing if you this resonates with you, and otherwise I will follow up a bit more specifically.
Yeah, so I would say that definitely one thing that companies in other fields can use is I would say more of those like internship programs, because for us internship isn't just like you come and maybe check what we're doing, but we literally offer a 3-month contract for those people, and they can hands-on start working with the support with the teams. So of course they don't maybe deep dive that much, but they would get the understanding of what is happening, how it works, and if it's something that they want to do in a long term. And also it will give them much better understanding of the field overall. So I think it's not only tech sector specific, but it gives everyone a really good understanding what they want to do with their future after university. And also now we have a graduate program, because the issue that we have seen is that even if you have engineers, for example, graduating universities, then typically tech companies already need someone who is at least on a mid-level or sometimes a senior level. But of course, you won't have those people on the market if they don't get the first chance to even work. So we've made the same mistakes for a long time, because and also I can see other tech companies, they have such a fast work pace. So if you need to start teaching somebody from the junior level, it can be really time consuming. But currently we're feeling that it's definitely beneficial to grow somebody inside of the company. The data from some other companies are also showing that those people tend to stay in the company in a long term, which is something that we really like, and I believe it can work in other fields as well. But I can definitely add here that, like mentioned also before, then of course, if you talk about like foreigners, even if they're already in the country, then the main barriers, even if they want to move between the different organizations, is the issue with the immigration laws. And if you don't fall under some kind of exception, it can be really hard to even get the residence permit, because the sponsorship rules aren't met. And that way, I've been also trying to cooperate with different organizations and governmental institutions as much as possible, and also bring other companies around the table as well. So to share I would say, our view and what are the issues on the market, because I would say the governments are trying to, of course, keep the country safe and limit immigration from that side of view, but like blocking everything isn't the solution. So we're trying to share the real data to support them to understand how we can cooperate here.
Thank you. Before you indicated that the recruitment was most prominent for non-European countries because it was difficult to compete for European talent, if we want to just bluntly say it like this. So could you say something a bit more about the profile of the participants in this program, and maybe also how you would think this program is? This is a program in Estonia, right? Is it something that is offered in various countries in which you're operating?
Currently, we do internships and graduate programs only in Estonia. With internships, it's open for everyone who are studying in Estonia or in Europe, so they can join the internship program. The only issue is that there might be some limitations based on the immigration background, so they need to have a right to work in Estonia. As said, that our immigration is limited, and as for the internship, we are offering like 3 months employment, and there are some limiting rules there. But the graduate program, based on my knowledge, has been really focusing also on the Estonian universities, because one thing that our surveys in Estonia are showing is that we have international students coming to Estonia, they graduate, they go back. So on top of the Estonian students, we want to keep those international students in Estonia for a longer period as well, because they have already adapted to the life. They have started to learn the language, all these kind of things. And also from the governmental perspective, they are always considered safer as like full new relocation, because I know that with every new person moving to Estonia, they evaluate the risks when they decide if to give out the permit or not. Then we want to use those people who are already in Estonia to maximize what we already have.
Thank you. I was curious also about the the training comes up, training initiatives come up very prominently. We've briefly reflected on also like automation and AI in particular. Maybe a little bit more on the training, because this is if I understand you correctly, Liz, this is a corporate-led training initiative, right? Or is it a collaboration with the government as well? Is there some kind of co-lead in this, or a private sector initiative? Because that could be interesting also in initiatives that you're flagging in vocational training, the dual
education system.
Dual education system. So how is this organized for you, Liz?
The graduate program is fully on a Bolt initiative. So we're trying to, I would say, lead by example. So I really hope that other companies will start doing that as well. So we have been, we've done it now for a bit over a year. So the first round will finish next year, and then we can share the final results, how it went. But we're hiring the next round already this year, and we're sharing the information with other companies as well if they want to learn how to do it. So yeah, it's mostly for engineering roles, so it's of course limited because we're lacking those the most in Estonia. But who knows, maybe in 5 years we will have a wider scope of that project.
Yeah. Reflecting on what your members are doing in the area of training, upskilling, what other initiatives that you're aware of? Maybe also from other sectors, because we've here focused on the tech sector, which has specificities. What you said, it's not so location bound, right? manufacturing might be quite different, right? Or healthcare, where you have to, deliver services in a specific location. But are there other training, upskilling initiatives that you're aware of?
Well, what's standard, and then you see the difference between multinationals and small companies is that they send people abroad, for example, management, normal people, and trainees. And they have an MD program for trainees, so they outsource it worldwide to see whether they are competent to work worldwide, and they follow them through the years too. So they have all institutionalized systems to see whether they can work abroad, whether they can develop the skills for the company needs. So that's an ongoing process, and based on their job level, they get labor conditions paid. So
yeah, please, yeah.
We haven't touched upon outsourcing and offshoring at all, and I'd like to know if your organizations associate that with anything negative. Is there a negative connotation to companies using that as a means to find skills?
Well, we see, for example, outsourcing IT knowledge to India, because there are a lot of people who can do the work.
And more cheaply.
Perhaps that's also an issue. But then comes the criteria. Do we put forward the question what we want properly, and do we get the output properly back? And that's sometimes the reason to insource again instead of outsourcing. But it's an ongoing process. Where can it be done best? Do we have the skills or not? The work has to be done. So we either need them here or we need them there, and that's a constant look for opportunities. Yeah.
Maybe quickly from my side, I don't necessarily have data, but whenever we talk about looking outside the EU or looking inside the EU, we kind of try to tackle both. We also have from some chambers some projects where they also track people, but again, more into the health sector, also from India, nurses, where they also have training also there, also when they come here, and also indeed also language training, so both on the content side, but also language side. But apart from this, we also advocate a lot on activating the population which is not working actually also within the EU. We look into needs, so young people not in education, training, or employment. I think there are around 8 million needs in the EU, so this is also quite a big number. How do we also look into, providing training for them, also introducing them to the labor market? We also look into women, for example, and within the chamber network, we also have lots of programs for women entrepreneurship. This is why I'm also covering the topic. And here it's also more into, training for them, how to develop the businesses, also how to attract finances, because we also see disparities into men versus women going to banks and asking for loans, for example, or grants. This, I would say, I come back a bit to the training side, because in many countries, companies are directly involved already. So they invest, if you think, I would put it as an investment, because they put their resources there, also salaries, into vocational training, the dual education system. But as I said before, this is not really happening everywhere. It really depends. And here it's also the responsibility of the government, I would say, in some countries to invest more from this perspective. And then apart from this, many chambers also work a lot on providing digital skills training. So not necessarily into a field or a sector, but cross-sectorial. And they also work a lot with elderly people, for example. So you have some people who are, now I don't want to put in ages or to set numbers, but also maybe people who are either not in employment or they are already working, but they don't have the digital skills to maybe move forward or even do their job as it is, because we were talking that the jobs in India are changing quite a lot. So in terms of training, I think from the companies, but also from the chamber side, they are providing quite a lot. It's either through the vocational training system, the dual education system, or these separate initiatives. And many of them, they're also happening with EU funding, actually. And I think it's also connected to what you were saying in your survey, that's maybe more SMEs, they need more support and also more funding. But I think it's also a question of if, realistically speaking, these SMEs can also access this funding. Because sometimes you look into lots of pages, what is the administrative burden? Again, do they have a person who can check 100 pages of the, rules to apply for a project? to also connect with other partners if they don't have maybe intermediaries. As I was telling you before, within the chamber network, we try to bring a lot the chambers, and then they bring the companies together. So then it's already one step less that they need to do into looking into this funding. So just to connect a bit, I don't think that it's only just one issue, but there are different parts that we have to look at.
Yeah. Other questions from the online participants?
There is one question from Sandra Lavanets. I don't know, Sandra, if you would like to ask the question yourself. Otherwise, I can read.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do so. So Mariana presented our findings regarding the use of non-traditional immigration channels, in particular intra-corporate transferees, contractual service suppliers, and digital nomads. And I wanted to ask you what your experiences are, whether this type of contracts are being used indeed as in the view of filling skill shortages, finding alternatives pools of workers, and how you evaluate this phenomenon, because especially contractual service suppliers operate in form of a services contract for a specific task for a given duration, and are considered more in terms of trade in services than in terms of workforce, right? So yes, I would like to hear how this phenomenon is present in your work and in the companies that you are in contact with. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Ruud, you're very
eager
with legal
to
issues.
answer this one. Well, we have a lot of problems with that because we have seen that as from the start of Corona, of course, and then it was able to work everywhere, and it was a paradise to work on an island in the sunshine, and even to have tax and permit facilities from exotic countries. But where it comes to is the first thing, is it allowed when you're, for example, working in the banking sector? You cannot do your activities everywhere, so there are limitations as far as their permits are concerned. But there are liabilities on each and every front, from migration, what does happen with your permit from the Netherlands if you work for a long extended period abroad? What happens with your social security cover? Do you have paid double in the other country? Labor conditions and ARBO rules on safety rules for that. Tax burden to be taken care of, and so forth. So we say don't do it. If you do it only within Europe, and then for a limited period, for a max of 4 weeks, because otherwise you have the risk of having a permanent establishment. You have to pay profit tax in that country, etc. So we see companies make offers. We can service you worldwide with an onshore company to deal with it. Well, please be careful with it, because it has a lot of downsides.
Yeah.
And what about the productivity of the people who do that?
Well, of course, they work 24/7. They are highly productive.
Okay, for a certain period of time before that collapse. Okay, there's an additional question online, or?
Yes, we have one.
And I think Albert, you had a question as well.
No.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So the online question first. Yeah.
Okay, we had one question from Shakirul Islam from Okup. I don't know, Shakirul, if you would also like to ask the question yourself.
So this is our partner in Bangladesh
Yes.
participating here.
Sure.
The third question about policies and recommendations, I would like to have a brief touch on that as well, perhaps, but let's take this question first, and then
This question, it concerns, of course, the language, which we've seen in GS4S that it's a huge point. So the question is if the company has any scope of investment to teach language outside of EU countries.
Liz, is this maybe from your company experience? Perhaps you could offer us a reflection on this. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that we don't offer it outside of the EU. As mentioned, our biggest focus with bringing talent in is currently Estonia. So here we teach Estonian language at Bolt. So we offer trainings and we cover the cost for employees, because they need to anyways learn the basic of the language in the first 5 years. But yeah, that's all we do with the language learning at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
We only have it for companies that take their spouses to the Netherlands, and then they have special trainings for that.
Like a social program.
Also, but also sometimes the language trainings.
Yeah. Okay. The final part of this session was actually about future policy agendas and how the insights from the survey, but also the reflections that we had so far in the panel, would kind of open up directions to pursue. Personally, I always find that a very interesting conclusion of a workshop. I'm curious, so reflecting on what we have been discussing today and what you've heard from the research, what are you missing, or where should we develop further?
Maybe I can start. Yeah?
I certainly have some things to preach.
The
preaching will always take longer. So, like I said, you go first.
Okay. Now, from my side, there are some points. One is also related to looking into indeed what is happening with some regions which are lagging behind because the talent is leaving to other parts. I mean, also as a Romanian, we have lots of people going to the west or to the north. So it's also this idea of brain drain. Also, the idea of right to stay now is also coming quite a lot in the policy discussions, especially in Brussels. So how do we look at policies which indeed will foster the idea of people moving, but also at the same time also not leaving behind all the villages or even different regions in different countries. So this, I think it's a very hard topic to look into, but could be quite interesting. So this is one point. Then second point, I will look into, again, what I was mentioning before about the capacity of SMEs to absorb. It's either about the support that I was talking about, funding, how easy it is actually for them to really get this support into either training, programs or even migration support. So I think this can also, it's quite important. And then I would also, look into more this idea of the labor mobility. Now, with what I mentioned before, with the skills portability initiative, with the fair labor mobility package also, it's quite interesting to look into how we can look into recognition of qualifications, but also the automatic recognition of qualifications, also with the common training frameworks, on different professions. I know that now the Commission is looking into the physiotherapist one, but is it also applicable for other sectors or not? And also in terms of migration from the Commission side, I'm talking about Commission also at Parliament, because we also talk about policy at EU level. There are so different initiatives, but do they really bring the impact that we really want? I'm talking about now the EU talent pool, and I know with Tesla we also had a discussion some time ago, right? That it's this tool of matching people and companies, but again, we have the member states which will have to be there voluntarily, but what if they don't want to take part in that or not? And also the talent partnerships. And now I was talking with someone during the break about the Commission launching what's the name? Multi-purpose legal gateway office with India on ICT, into attracting people from India to here again. So there are so many things happening, but I think we need to look into more what is the real impact that we will have or not. And also looking into all different actors. And also when I was talking about the brain drain and people living also within the EU, but also from the EU, from outside the EU into the EU, both sides, I would say.
Yeah.
So maybe.
Thank you very much. I have a lot of points dotted down. So
I want to take the role.
I only have 2 points. We are a trade bloc in the European Union, and we have to compete with trade blocs like the US, like India, like China. So don't make it too hard for an administrative reason for companies within the EU, because you're creating problems to compete worldwide. So it's addressing the EU to look into the legislation on this point. The other point is that the current government had a plan for a pilot to attract vakkrachten. Well, they are already in action for 2 months, but they are so slow. We are asked for this for 10 years already, but I have a company like ASML who's standing in line saying, when can I subscribe for the pilot? Because we need people with a salary less than 6,000 euros because we need them now. When can we start?
And this is a national initiative,
This is a Dutch
right?
national issue we really needed to address and quickly.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Lies, would you like to have a final reflection? And then I think I'd like to close this panel.
Yeah, I would like to add that as the whole EU is currently and in the future as well lacking the workforce, then I would say that definitely governments need to understand that as we're seeing some countries making the rules stricter, some like better for skilled migrants, then I would say that the countries who don't understand the importance of that topic at the moment are giving the advantage to other countries who are already working on that topic, because unfortunately we all are fighting for the same talent typically. So that's why I think it's also a call to the governments to understand what's the future, and we need to think ahead, not only be reactive but more proactive.
Okay. I think that's a wonderful conclusion of this workshop. I couldn't have said it better. So this is bringing the centrality of today's topic back to the table. I would like to thank all internal consortium speakers, but also the external participants very much for sharing their insights from scholarly work, but also importantly from the field of practice. Thanks for the open discussions, and stay tuned with our project. In the upcoming months, as we're concluding the project, there will be plenty of outputs that we will disseminate.
At that point, maybe I could just be cheeky and ask feedback on our policy brief that will come out next month. Would you be willing to read it?
Yeah.
That's going to be longer than the report you got today.
No problem.
Yeah.
But
So
you can read the 23-page long document, so I think you can do this.
And we can get the sheets too that were presented today. So
yeah, so we will circulate them, and we don't feel put on the spot now, but we will approach you for your reflectivity as well. Thank you all very much, and have a nice day.